take one. So introduce yourselves. Who are you?
I'll go first. Hi, I am Michael Upson. I am the founder and resident DJ of the Leeds-based queer club night Love Muscle. I've been running parties in Leeds for the last 15 years. The last 10 of those have been spent specifically running queer parties, aka Love Muscle. We have started a project to try and get not only Love Muscle a more permanent home, but a space for lots of other queer nights in the city that maybe need the space.
Hi, I'm Rachel Goodman. I am a DJ and put on events in Leeds, career events, and been looking for someone to open the space with for a couple of years now, and Michael and I met last year and realised that we'd both spent the last couple of years sort of in the background, like planning towards opening a queer space in Leeds, and that's when we decided to come together and do this project.
Fantastic. We'll get straight into it then, I guess. So, Michael, what will make the venue different from others, and what is the aim of the project?
I think I've seen the impact that the club night that I run has had. So, for example, kids that used to come to that party have set their own events up. It's drawn people into the city, and it's helped contribute towards this this really vibrant queer scene that Leeds has. I think having our own space, the impact you can have is sort of tenfold on that. So it's really about sort of like just nurturing talent in the city. So uplifting people that are already here, giving them space to perform, giving events that have maybe reached their capacity in smaller venues space to grow without losing the sort of like things that make intimate spaces special, allow them to grow in a meaningful way without sort of like losing or compromising on some of that on some of that sort of like special energy you get from a smaller venue. To, I suppose, try and keep people in Leeds. So Leeds is a very transient city. People come for we've got 3-4 great universities, all with great arts departments that brings a wealth of talent into the city, but they maybe stay here for sort of 3 or 4 years, and then there's just not enough work for them, or they can't develop their art in the way that they want to. So it will be about providing them a space and hopefully encouraging some of those people to stay.
Or to come back.
Yeah, or to come back.
Yeah.
And the door is always open. And then thirdly, sort of, bring people to the city as well. So I would love this space to have an international reputation and a national reputation that brings people from other cities and from across the world in, and sort of allows us to collaborate with some exciting people. So that's the vision for it. But essentially, its priority will be to uplift and nurture the talent that we already have in the city, and that's a space for not only electronic music nights, but musicians, theatre, drag collectives, performance art, that full spectrum of creative industries, with a focus on the queer community.
Fantastic. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Rachel, you said that you're using your money generated from the parties to raise funds. How many parties will you have to do in order to achieve your goal?
So I think something that we've realised after the last party is that it would take a hell of a lot of parties to actually raise the money that we do need to open a space. We're planning about 4 or 5 parties this year, and going to use some of that as like seed money for, that'll be it. Part of it's like a proof of concept, so we can go to people like arts councils and funding bodies and stuff like that for grants, and be able to say, look, you know, we've been able to, there's a desire for this in Leeds, you know, we can turn a profit, it's like, you know, it's a viable business model, and, you know, imagine what we could do if we had a bit of like, you know, grant money to secure a space.
Yeah, I think, you know, the costs to set up a space, this isn't, you know, this isn't buying a venue, this is, you know, renting a physical space. The setup cost of that can be, you know, somewhere between £80,000 and £100,000. You know, if you're thinking about toilets, infrastructure, sound systems, building bars, stock for the bars,
accessibility things,
security,
yeah,
just the infrastructure setup side of things.
licensing,
is significant, and there's two ways of doing that. Well, there's three ways of doing that. The first is get an expensive loan out from the bank and have to pay that off. Now, what that impacts is how much you can pay your staff, like, and also like at the moment as well, like just how risky the project is, and also for people who don't have financial backing, you know, that's our belongings or our assets or that are on the line, and you know that's a very high risk strategy at the moment considering how volatile the market is. The other is investors. Now, I think there's multiple examples of where this doesn't work. You know, you've got an organisation that wants to seem to be doing good things, has got loads of money, hands that over, but then they get into bed with somebody who is really problematic, and then the whole project collapses. So, especially at a time where like wealth and power is consolidating across the world, it's very difficult to get that money from some organisation that isn't connected to something really problematic and exploitative. And also, we don't want to be essentially just running a bar for somebody else. And again, there's an element of cash that they will take out of the business, and that again won't go to the people that run the space. You know, the workers that run the space. So the third is grant money essentially, and we can raise a bit of funds through these parties, albeit like when you start to actually run these spaces yourself, you realise how expensive it is to run and how tight the margins are and stuff. But you know, we estimate that maybe if we did sort of like 5 or 6 parties, providing that you sell out and are busy, we can maybe get a third of the money. We'd then be reliant upon other grant awarding bodies to be able to say, okay, look, we've demonstrated that this is this is an entity, a business that works. You know, we're paying the staff really well. We've managed to pay ourselves. We've managed to pay the DJs, a good rate. Can we, we've demonstrated our part of the bargain. Will you be able to match that sort of thing and do some match funding? So the parties are a really good way of us practicing all of the stuff we're going to have to do when we've got the space, and also demonstrating that, you know, if a grant body gave us some money, that we wouldn't just squander it.
Yeah, of course. Have you got sort of an estimated timescale for the project then?
Well, we're sort of thinking like it would be good to be somewhere to have a space in the next 18 months. I think that's kind of the goal. Obviously, this is dependent on like how much we can raise ourselves and like the timescales for getting funding and stuff through like through grants and stuff like that. And we won't know until we start applying for these like how long it'll take, and it also depends on what venues we can find in the city that are suitable, because we don't just want to move into somewhere that's not suitable. If it's miles out of the city and we know that no one's going to be showing up to it, it's like we've opened it, but then it might close in a couple of months, so you want to make sure that the place that we're getting is actually like it's accessible for people and it's in a good location, but it's also not in the busiest part of town where
it's got to be the right location. It's got to be the right venue, right?
Yeah.
And it's got to be the right time, and we've got to have the right funds ready to go. Because we probably only get one shot at it. If you find the right space and you go, but then 6 months down the line they decide to build some flats there and you have to shut down.
Yeah.
Those start costs are gone.
Yeah.
And you're back to square one.
Yeah.
Yeah, those sort of like independent business sort of market and everything is so volatile in itself, isn't it? So I do find it, you know, even from sort of an outsider's perspective, I can kind of tell that it's, you know, it's kind of if you get your one shot, you get your one shot. So,
Yeah.
so it's really impressive. So will it be an independent space then, or will it be connected to sort of another promotion or events company?
I mean, it is just us two.
Yeah.
Literally.
We've we've done some good things so far. We've set up a CIC. So the name of the CIC is Aorta Events, which has got a little bit of a connection back to Love Muscle, with the sort of the old anatomical heart logo. But that is essentially a community interest company that has a special clause on it, which means that any of the profit can't be taken out of the business. It has to be reinvested back into the business. Which aligns with what we want to do. But yeah, not associated with any sort of third party or getting funding from any sort of like privately owned third party.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Is the plan to purchase or slash own the space, or have you got sort of any in mind, sort of, or is there some in sight?
Well, I think to purchase a space would just be prohibitively expensive. I mean, you've seen the rent for places around town, and with all of these, I mean, Leeds is just, so much of it is like earmarked for redevelopment, and it's just, it's all being sold off to these developers building, high-rise apartments, and it's just so spaces that sort of industrial units that probably would have, could have worked for us, maybe 10, 20 years ago or something. It's too expensive nowadays, so I think we'd be looking to rent somewhere, get like a long-term lease on it, and that's what the money that we're raising will be going towards, like securing like a lease on the space. But I mean, to buy a space would be probably millions at this point.
Yeah.
And also, you commit yourself far too much if you buy a premises, even if that was even if this was 10, 20 years ago, we bought a space. You don't know what's going to happen around that building, and it's incredibly high risk. And some of the best nightclubs in the world were only around for 5, 10 years. Do you know what I mean? And then they disappear. These spaces, are temporary, and I think we understand that. But we want to put our best foot forward so we can stay as long as we can in one space. Would be the idea.
I guess.
But we've not found.
No.
We have also the idea behind doing these parties is that we test out new spaces, and we might, hopefully over the next 18 months we may find somewhere where we're like, right, this is it. Why don't we just do it here?
Those great parties as well. Even if they aren't cemented in concrete in the building for the rest of time, it kind of like the legend of it kind of continues on.
Yeah.
Which I think is like places like Hacienda and stuff, and you've got them kind of ideas where it should essentially last long in the memories of the people that get to enjoy it as well. So it cements itself in many different things. I guess kind of like sort of following up on that, what kind of like have you got an idea of like the capacity of the venue and like the kind of size of the space that it might be?
I think the minimum capacity to make this work, if we want to do all the things that we said, like be able to nurture talent and create jobs for people, and
for it to be viable for promoters to put events on as well, I think.
Yeah. That again, all of that.
Yeah.
We're looking at a minimum of 300 cap, with a maximum of 500, so that you've got a space that can facilitate some really small, intimate, fun parties, but at the same time we can do some bigger events where it warrants it.
Yeah.
So besides sort of buying tickets and showing up, what else can we collectively do to sort of help towards the sort of greater goal? And sort of what can allies do to help this happen?
Well, we do have a PayPal donation page, which I know a few people have asked about, and I think maybe we need to do a bit more of a drive on sort of making that, making more people aware of it.
Yeah.
The link is in our bio.
Yeah.
On the Pleasuredome Instagram page.
Yeah. And And I also think just like getting the word out about it, like, you know, as cliche as it sounds, like sharing it on social media and telling your friends and family and stuff like that about what we're doing, because I think, you know, only part of the community is like on Instagram and is following the page and stuff like that, but there's so many more queer people in Leeds and the surrounding area who just won't know about the project, because that's the primary way we're marketing it at the moment.
We really want to reach out into, you know, places like Otley, Shrewsbury. You know, the Leeds is it's not a massive city, but in the immediate surrounding area, there are millions of people. There are millions of queer people who don't live in Leeds. So just really creating space for them as well. And I think you know, there's a bit of outreach that needs to be done on our behalf. I think probably as with you know, whenever you're trying to sort of like make a meaningful connection with any community. But yeah, also if you could pass the word on, then that would be great. I suppose the other thing is keep an eye out for spaces. They're often very gatekept, and only a few people know about them. Or you know, you might do an art exhibition, and you might stumble across something, and you think, oh, this is cool. Tell us about it. You know, try and keep your ear to the ground for us, so we can sort of find these spaces before they are snapped up by people trying to create low quality high-rise flats.
And also primarily, I guess the best way to support us is by buying a ticket and coming down to the parties, spending money on the bar, you know, and bringing a crew along.
Being present as well.
And you know, especially if you feel like you can afford it, you know, paying that extra £5 for like, you know, the pay it forward ticket, you know, I think really does help us out. It's not lining someone's pockets with extra cash. It's like it's going into, you know,
the thing that will make this happen, the funding that will make this happen. And I suppose that is our priority at the moment. You know, for the next 18 months is just accruing those funds to be able to make it happen, and that is done most effectively by people buying a ticket and turning up to the event. You're also getting a fun night out at the same time.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I guess, you know, we're in quite a trying time at the moment, sort of economically and financially, and people sort of around sort of the area that I live in and everything. It can be quite difficult to afford such a, you know, them kind of tickets. So I mean, obviously, it goes towards such a fantastic cause, but sort of, you know, why are the ticket prices high? And you know, will this be the same in the event space? Yeah,
I think this is the reason these ticket prices are, you know, as expensive as they are, is solely because we really need to get to that funding target essentially. You know, and what we also didn't want to do is, you know, if we just had a GoFundMe or a funding page, it's that constantly having to go back out to people who have already donated to say, can you give us a bit more money? Whereas with this, you know, you are having I know I keep going back to this, but you're having a fun night out, but you're also donating some of that money to our cause. So it felt like a more sustainable way to repeatedly ask for donations from people, especially when Leeds is such a quite small city with a small scene. The idea when the venue is open is to absolutely not have ticket prices that are that high. Now we have been discussing a proper membership scheme where you pay sliding scale between £10 a month to £40 a month or whatever you can afford, but then all the events in that space are free. Now we are in the early stages of like figuring out how viable that is from just from a financial perspective, but just something that allows people to budget a bit better, but also, you know, that space also might have some free meeting space, meeting rooms, or
the art studios, or
studios, performance art space that people could, you know, come in and could come in and use as part of that membership. So and also trying to like properly build a community around that space as well by doing that. And essentially then, you know, you might have somebody who they might pay the bottom end of the scale, which is £10 a month, and they go to 6 parties, do you know what I mean? So, you know, that works out infinitely cheaper than somebody that have to pay repeatedly on top of that. But there's some things we have to work out there as to how we support the people that also promote their events in our space as well. So, but yeah, we'll the idea is to make it accessible, essentially,
Yeah.
and we're going to be thinking of different ways to do that.
I mean, I think you can tell sort of already by the things that he's saying, it's very directed towards making sure that this party is for the people. It doesn't feel like there's a kind of a secret sort of thing there where it's like, you know, you can't tell there's no sort of profiteering happening.
Yeah.
And it's every sort of single, you know, cent that's getting earned from the parties and everything is coming straight into use. And you know, I think it's really important as well for people to know where the money is going.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes like prices are high for certain events and tickets, but you don't know exactly where it's going, and it kind of feels a little bit like a shot in the dark.
Because the rest of the industry is not like that.
Yeah.
People get really suspicious, I
Of
think.
course.
So yeah, just
fun for the people.
trust us
Yeah.
Yeah.
that, you know, we're doing this for a reason, because we want to create a space that is owned by the community, essentially. So.
Yeah. So on a sort of, you know, a different note, the sort of sound of the space, you know, what kind of ideas and plans have you got for that?
Well, I think sound is really important to both of us, and I think it is important to every person who goes clubbing, whether they realise it consciously or not. You know, it can be the difference of whether or not you stay in that club for an hour and have your ears ringing the next day and think, oh, that wasn't great, you know, I'm not going back there. Or it could be a transformative experience where it's, you know, you feel enveloped in really like in the moment, and you know, we're keen to have the best sound that we can afford, I think.
Yeah.
You know, and we're going to try different things depending on which venues we get, because ultimately it'll be the venue we end up in that determines what sort of sound system we go for.
Yeah.
You know, we'd like something with, for example, like the fidelity of like the Cosmic Slop system, but maybe that's a little bit less delicate, and you can sort of, you know,
Crank it
more.
up.
Yeah, crank it up.
Yeah.
And it's a bit less, fragile, should we
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So something,
Yeah.
if you think about like a fabric system, which is like Martin Audio or something like that, where you've got this incredible clarity, but at the same time it still kicks. But just, you know, being able to pass, and sometimes it doesn't really matter like what speakers you have. It's just it's how it's programmed and how it's sound engineered. And I think some venues it differs from party to party depending on who the promoter is. But what we really want to do is sort of transfer some of that knowledge and those skills across to them, so that they understand the importance of, you know, good sound quality, not having it just really loud, or, you know, just creating the best party that they can have using sound, no matter what that is, whether that is performance art, drag, club nights, you know.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I guess that's a fair point. I'm kind of assuming, you know, quite a lot of the things are kind of left to the idea of the space. You know, it's where you get and what you acquire. Is it will determine quite a lot of the factors that you're thinking of.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess the question that we're all asking is, you know, what will the space be called when it's open?
I suppose it's like the Pleasuredome Must Be Built is a working title.
Yeah.
And I think it needs to be exactly what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
Right. So that again is going to be determined around what the space is when we find it, I suppose. So is it a more of a pub style venue, and therefore do we need a quirky pub name? Is it more of a big warehouse industrial unit, therefore it needs to be a bit more serious? There are a number of different considerations, I think, but it does need to just sort of really, when you say it, you know what it is.
Yeah.
Essentially, we've not got there yet.
I think there's an element of transparency in it, isn't there? Sort of having, if it does what it says on the tin, it's like we know who you are, we know what the venue's all about, and that is kind of encapsulated in that title.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, more of a sort of serious question I would say is, when you open, will you have a disco ball?
The biggest. No, I think we have talked about this actually. What was it you were thinking? Something like a metre and...
A metre disco ball,
Yeah.
a metre diameter, which is a lot bigger than you think it sounds. Just whatever fits the space, but like I've never There's only been a couple of times where we've ever had a venue big enough to warrant using a metre-sized disco ball, but or a ceiling high enough. But yeah, you know, a metre would be great.
It'd do.
Yeah, it's achievable.
Yeah.
And then, you know, sort of when you finally open, you know, I think a nice question to sort of finish off the interview, I guess, would be, you know, what's the first record? This is directed to you both. What's the first record that you're going to play?
Oh God. I mean, my initial instinct is to say welcome to the Pleasuredome.
Yeah.
My friend knows Hollywood.
But that would be misleading because that's not the name.
That's not the name of the club, so
Maybe.
yeah. That's a good question. Probably be something ambient as people are coming into the club, but yeah, have to have a think about that.
Again,
depends who's playing as well. It might not be us. Yeah.
I did want 5 minutes to think of a witty answer to this before we started, but I haven't managed to get there. There's what is it? There's Welcome to the Club, but who's that by?
Oh,
this doesn't make for good interview.
is it Harold something? And
It's not the Harmon and the Blue Notes. We'll come back to you on that. You'll have to find out essentially.
Yeah. Come down and find out. Yeah.
There's the witty answer.
There's the witty answer.
Amazing. Thank you very much, both of you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Much.
Thank you.